And we're here live at another Live with Kobo Writing Live Q&A. Hello to everyone joining. I'm really happy to have my wonderful colleague Zack with us this week talking about all things audiobooks. Welcome, Zack.
Hello, hello, hello. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Great. And for anyone that's watching live, feel free to comment any of your questions into the chat and we'll try and pick them up and get them throughout the chat or at the end. And let us know where you're coming from. We already have Rashid is coming from Lagos in West Africa. I feel like Jody made fun of me because I mispronounced it before, but now I've got Lagos down. But yeah, let us know where you're tuning in from. Zack and I are both in Toronto, just getting ready for a nice long summer weekend. So let's get started. So Zack, can you tell us who you are, what you do at Kobo, and how you got into the audiobook industry?
For sure, yeah. So I am the director of audiobooks growth here at Kobo, and really my job is all about getting people to fall in love with audiobooks, to fall in love with listening with their ears and reading with their ears. As a longtime audiobook lover, I think that it's such a wonderful format for consuming stories and kind of enjoying storytelling is like a medium that's been around for millennia. And so I love kind of bringing that tradition forward into the technological kind of space. I grew up listening to audiobooks on like family road trips, and we would take out like the this like book of cassette tapes from the library, and just I remember like these long car rides of like putting it in and trying to get it to the right side and continuing. I'm pretty sure at one point I listened to The Alchemist, but all the chapters were jumbled. Like we weren't like I didn't, and so I still don't to this day like don't know what happens in that book. I've definitely listened to it, but actually don't know the plot because we got the cassettes wrong.
I'm sure there was a lot of time that you were spending with the old pen in the cassette trick to like
Oh,
roll the back.
100%. Yeah, figuring that out and rewinding and forwarding.
Mhm.
I mean, and just in terms of like how I got into audiobooks, I mean, it's really a great format, and what I love is that I can fit more reading into my life. I don't really go anywhere without my headphones in my pocket, so I can just pop them in when I'm out for a walk or just like hanging out or doing dishes or laundry, and we find we'll talk about this a little bit more, but certainly this is pretty standard as far as the way in which people use audiobooks. Yeah, I think that reading with your ears is just an excellent way for people to get more reading in, and just for those who are not sure or like have kind of different views about it, my strong opinion is that it's not cheating.
I know there's some discussion in that, isn't there? That like, are audiobooks cheating at all? Like, does it count as reading? But I'm on your same side.
For sure. It's oh yeah. And in fact there was this study that University College of Berkeley ran where they did brain scans of people reading with their eyes and then also listening to audiobooks. And what they saw was that like the same parts of the brain were lighting up.
Oh, that's so
And
interesting.
so like, and then there was another study that looked at comprehension and retention, and like 30% of the population are auditory learners, and so people do kind of retain and they do engage in a story or in a book. I mean, to the brain, it's very similar,
Mhm.
like mechanically, which is
Yeah.
really interesting. So no, it's not cheating.
And Rich in the comments here, he agrees with you. It isn't cheating, whether reading or listening. One is absorbing a story.
100%,
Yes.
100% agree.
And we have Rich is coming from Manhattan. We have Dr. Graham Lawler is in Wales and Bruce Bishop in sunny Halifax. So thank you guys for tuning in. So some people might not realize that Kobo actually sells audiobooks. So do you mind going over like the Kobo book, the audiobook offering and
Yeah.
where they're available, how they can be listened to?
Definitely, yeah. So at Kobo, we have three main audio ways to get audiobooks. So the first is a subscription model, which is all you can eat audio. That's currently just in the Netherlands. And then we have a credit model, which I think a lot of people are quite familiar with, where it's, you get you pay your subscription fee and you get your monthly token that you can redeem on pretty much anything in the catalog. And we have that credit model in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the US, France, Spain, the UK, and then
Wow.
kind of a smattering of other countries. We call it our rest of world region. So there's kind of something for we're kind of got amazing coverage kind of across the globe.
Nice.
And then the third way you can get audiobooks with Kobo is what we call a la carte, which is kind of the pay as you go approach. And there we have books, or we have storefronts in more than 40 countries. So really, no matter where you are, we're trying to get audiobooks into as many people's ears as possible.
Yeah, it sounds like we're not missing anything really. And one of my favorite things about audiobooks with Kobo is that it's all in one app. It's the free app that you can download on your app store for iOS and Android. And it's all in one place. So we have ebooks, audiobooks, and if you're in a country that has Kobo Plus, our subscription model, that's all accessible in one app.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, like not having to kind of pop from one to the other is massive, and really just like brings that convenience, because I know that I'm often, I can speak for myself, but I'm often like switching. I've got a couple like audiobooks on the go, and then usually a an ebook on the go, and I can read them all on my phone. I've just always got something to read that kind of is the kind of first line of defense against doom scrolling for me. Is just like, I'm gonna pick up my phone and I'm gonna read instead of instead of hopping on the socials.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we have a couple of questions coming in. So, Rashid is asking about sales. What genres do well, and how can Kobo maximize sales of audiobooks? So, I guess, Rashid, I'll step back one sec and just sort of say that through Kobo Writing Life, you can publish your audiobook with us if you have it ready. It's a really, really easy process. So if you don't see your audiobook tab in the Kobo Writing Life in your account, email the team at writinglife@kobo.com and we'll enable this for you. So you can upload your audiobook and publish it as easy as you can an ebook. And because we process everything in-house, your book will be published, we say, between 24 and 72 hours. But more often than not, it is within a couple of hours and definitely no longer than 24. So for any authors that weren't aware of that, you can definitely publish your audiobooks with us. So in terms of marketing, what I kind of found that was so interesting with audiobooks is that it's because, book selling is like, has been around forever, and audiobooks is sort of a different type of selling. I like listening to nonfiction as like a way of learning while I'm like walking around and like just making it feel like my walk is more valuable. And yeah, I know that with Kobo, we definitely can see marketing around like mood or different tasks and things like that. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. So, we let's see, a couple of questions there. So, if we're looking at like when we're marketing, I mean, we often think about where and when do people spend time listening to audiobooks and engaging. So, what are the tasks and what are the things that we're doing? And we actually just finished some research, some customer research about listening habits, and that showed, not surprisingly, that some of people's listening habits have changed as their lives have changed with COVID. So prior to COVID, one of the main places where people listened was in their cars,
Mhm.
driving to work or taking road trips, or commuting on public transit. We saw in-car listening definitely decline in 2020 compared to years past. And now what we see is a lot more listening during, when people are doing household chores. They're getting
That's me.
their extra. Oh, same. Doing the dishes or like folding mountains of laundry. Like audiobook
Yes.
is key.
My house is spotless when I'm really into what I'm listening to.
That's
You're like,
amazing.
what else can I clean? Like, this isn't
That's
done
so
yet.
good. So good. Yeah, and I mean, and that's really one of the reasons why people like audiobooks so much is because you can fit that reading in when you're doing something else. Um, and I think that one of the other things that people have reported is that people are also using audiobooks to unwind, whether that's like something that's a little bit more kind of relaxing and meditation oriented, or kind of in like the self-help genre, or as like a bit of an escape and to be told a story. Over the course of lockdown, we saw like mysteries and thrillers and suspense books have been the most popular, and 31% of customers report to listening to these genres the most. But we also saw a rising interest in romance, fitness, faith-based, and self-help content, as people were, just their kind of day-to-day lives were changing, and so the type of content they were consuming was also different. So, yeah, I think that we when we as Kobo are telling people in marketing about audiobooks, we try to think about when and where people are consuming the content, and then try to match that marketing with the content itself. And like we know that certain books are really motivating for like people who are working out. So really, it's for us, it's about matching the kind of the content that people are listening to with the places in which they're listening to it.
It's really interesting because that's not something that we think about at all really with ebooks, because it's like, you're thinking of a quiet time where you just want somebody to get really sucked in. So yeah, that's like super interesting insights. Something that surprised me as well, and this is probably just because like I listen to so much nonfiction, is that we sell more fiction than nonfiction, which like given the like big memoirs that have come out and all the political books in the past year and everything, I was really surprised by that. So it's very encouraging, especially for like the genre fiction markets, to see that like that's really what our customers are looking for.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, there's again, like one of the great things about audio is that there is a little something for everyone. But certainly, yeah, like fiction being a big player in this kind of like, I mean, who doesn't love being told a story?
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to kind of watch those like genre trends kind of change and morph. And we also saw this year a bit of an uptake in children,
Oh,
and in children's content, and so more kids, or more parents, I guess, leaning into audiobooks for their kids as a way of decreasing screen time.
mhm.
So that was something that's been reported in some of the audiobooks research that we've seen.
Nice. And I know that some of the kind of like podcasts that I listen to, like Joanna Penn talks a lot about audiobooks and things like that. So these are sort of just questions that have just come to me, Zach, so forgive me for not asking you beforehand. But what do you think is the impact on so I think for children's books in particular, the rise of like the smart speaker, because that's like really how children are probably listening. Like they're probably not like you, I don't know, as a parent, if you want them directly on your phone. But do you think this really is increasing like how audiobooks are getting so popular now?
Yeah, I think there's probably a few things at play there. Certainly, the technology and the way in which people are accessing audiobooks is really contributing to the pickup. I mean, smartphone is one of the main, really the kind of number one place where people, or device that people are listening on. Um, but as more homes get smart speakers and Bluetooth speakers, I think it just makes it easier to have on in the home. So yeah, I think that that's definitely contributing, and more and more people just still discovering the format. And I think that that's, it's exciting, and I love that more kids have been listening to both podcasts and audiobooks.
Yeah.
Because I think that they're learning what we know, which is that it's just such a delightful way to consume content. And I think anyone who's like an avid podcast listener is naturally, if you love podcasts, you should absolutely try audiobooks.
Yeah.
Because I think that they scratch a similar itch, and you can get that kind of longer form of content from a book than you can from like episodic podcast.
Yeah, I've started falling asleep to audiobooks, and I really which maybe is a terrible idea because I'll forget what I've listened to. But I really like the feature where you can stop at the end of the chapter so I don't have to keep going, because
Oh yeah.
I was talking to my friend recently, and she said she like put on an audiobook and fell asleep, and she woke up and it was like epilogue, and she's like, "Oh no, how do I
Where
go
was
back to
I?
this?" Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. The sleep timer is essential. So you can set it to like end at the end of your chapter,
Mhm.
or you can set it to stop like on like after 5 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely a good way to make sure you don't lose your spot when you doze off.
Yeah, for sure. So a couple of questions coming in, so I'll try and get to these. So Mustafa is asking if we're expanding exposure distribution beyond Walmart into other parts of the world. And yes, for sure. Earlier in the chat, Zach mentioned all of the many, many countries that we are in. So maybe you can go back and see that we're in a lot of different places. But as we're talking about different countries, I wanted to know if there was anything that jumped out at you at like a different trend, like, is Australia really similar to Canada in what they're listening to? Do the Europeans have a total different vibe with their audiobooks? Anything?
Yeah, a couple of the highlights that I've been seeing. Spain and Spanish language content is a huge growth area right now.
Wow.
We're seeing a massive influx of titles being published. There were over 12,000 new titles published in Spanish in 2020, which is like a major leap from the years prior. We're seeing a lot more, a number of different subscription services um, enter the Spanish markets. So certainly that's kind of an interesting one in terms of like genres. Fiction is really strong in Spain, and then self-help in Latin America and Mexico, and then a lot of Spanish children's content in the U.S. Um,
Nice.
another kind of set of data I have is around France, which is also, I mean, France is another really great market for audio. It's estimated currently the audiobooks is about 1 to 2% of the total book market, but there's a lot more readers who are turning to audiobooks in France, and I've what are we looking at here? So 19% of the population of France, approximately, has listened to an audiobook.
Oh,
So which is well under kind of the average in other regions. But I think what's interesting is, again, it's a growth market. More people are becoming aware of the format, and the content is following. More publishers are investing in French language and Spanish language content for sure.
nice. Yeah, because I know that there's sort of like a big push with kind of the traditional publishers to get their, match their new releases to ensure that the audiobooks are there, but then also to go back and look at their backlist and see that it's available. It's kind of interesting because with ebooks, people have kind of taken on digital reading at different times. And audiobooks seems to be sort of progressing similarly, close enough within the countries. If you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
that
yeah,
people are adopting it in France and Canada at the same rate, whereas like digital reading might not have been quite as like that.
totally.
So yeah, I'm just thinking aloud now. But okay, so we have a question from Bruce is asking for a ballpark idea of what people charge for an audiobook of just under 100,000 words for creation. So Bruce, the way audiobooks work is that if you go to a company, they're going to quote you by the hour. So it wouldn't be by your word count. It's going to be our finished product. And I think you could kind of ballpark anywhere between like $150 an hour to $250 an hour. So it is an investment. It is sort of not the cheapest route to go down, especially because you want to make sure you're getting a really good narrator and that the production is really great. But with the cost of creation in mind, Zack, do you think, why do you think an indie should create an audiobook?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a big growth market. First of all, so I think that there is a lot of opportunity for independent authors to get their work out there and in front of a really engaged and passionate audiobook community. There are like little pockets of the internet where people get together and talk about audiobooks, and they're often, there is a lot of chatter about kind of new and emerging authors and indies, and kind of I think a little bit of cachet in the community to discover something new and cool. And then the other thing I think that's really worth noting is that in the industry, we're seeing the subscription models really change. So there's been a shift from kind of the token model, which you would know from from which we have, as well as the Audibles of the world, to a all-you-can-eat subscription. Now, what's interesting is booksellers are seeing that this is the trend, and customers are really getting behind it in a big way for all-you-can-eat ebooks and audiobooks. But some of the main publishers are a little bit slower to release their front list and their best sellers. So I think that the opportunity for independent authors is to be in a place where the big players aren't yet. There isn't as much kind of like front list razzle dazzle content or the really big bet. I think about like the Obama books and like things like that. These really big bang titles, they're not hitting the all-you-can-eat catalogs, and so independents can kind of fill those gaps and make sure that that your content is in a place where you're just not competing against like the world's biggest budgets and the world's biggest authors.
Yeah, and one of my favorite things about working with independent authors is that they're so innovative and willing to try things. The fact that so many indies are already on the audiobook game just really goes to show that. And I think, like you said, it's definitely a growing market that if you can, you should jump into. So Grace has a question. Can she have her audiobook on Audible and then also on Kobo? So the answer would be it completely depends on the agreement that you have with Amazon and Audible. If you don't have exclusivity, you can, of course. At Kobo, we don't ask you for exclusivity, so you can publish on Kobo and as many other places as possible. In fact, we encourage your books being as widely available as possible to try and just get those readers wherever they are. So it's very, very easy to upload with Kobo Writing Life. And I just wanted to cover the royalty structure just for anyone that's curious. So if you upload your book to Kobo Writing Life, if it's priced above $2.99, you earn 45% of each sale. If it's under $2.99, you earn 35% of each sale. And if it's in the subscription model that Zack has been talking about, and it's used, a subscription token is used for redemption, then you earn 32% of that sale. So it's really competitive royalty rates. When you come direct, you're not having to forego any affiliate fees or anything like that. And one thing that I would like to point out too is that you can set the currency. You completely control the pricing. You can set the currency in 16 countries. So you can hit up all of the places that we're selling that Zack had mentioned. So I think that's something to sort of just be aware of. And also you can create a pre-order with us far ahead as you like. We have no restrictions there. But I'll end my ramble now. But Zach, I wanted to kind of mention as well that something that's sort of interesting about and a good opportunity for indies getting into the market is that there's kind of like quite a difference between the pricing structure that traditional publishers are going for and that indies are going for. I know when we talked to our colleague Elise, who kind of runs a lot of the marketing that we do, she sort of advises authors price around the price of the subscription model. So you're wanting to show the value of your book to encourage somebody to use their credit. Is that something that you'd advise as well?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, that's great advice from Elise. I think that a lot of people who are on the credit model, they're shopping for kind of the biggest bang for their credit, right? So in Canada, they're paying $12.99 a month for their Kobo audiobook subscription, and so what they don't want to necessarily do is spend their credit on a book that they can get for $5.99. I think that a lot of audiobook subscribers are really looking for that kind of recurring value, especially when some big bang frontlist titles are in the kind of the $40 to $45 range. So definitely, pricing kind of in and around what the subscription price is in any given country. So like in the UK, it's £6.99. In the US, it's $9.99. In Canada, $12.99. Australia, New Zealand, $12.99. So that's kind of I would say, a really strong place to be. And I would also say, don't be shy about pricing an audiobook, a little bit on the higher side of that, and then seeing how it performs. I think that there's opportunity to test and learn what your audience is, what their threshold for purchases is.
For sure. And because you can control the pricing, you really have the ability to test at any time. So you can definitely change your audiobook price and kind of test along. We usually recommend for ebook pricing. The Kobo store is really great you can browse all of the other country geos. So if you're on Kobo.com, there's a little flag at the top which indicates where you are. But kind of a top tip of mine is to click on that flag, and it'll actually show you all of the other storefronts. So if you're not too sure what to price your book at, your audiobook or ebook, I would say have a little browse around for similar genre, similar authors, and try and see what everyone else is doing. And that'll kind of give you a place to aim for. So yeah, I think that's sort of interesting. One thing that surprised us actually when we started doing some audiobook promotions. So we have promotions through Kobo Writing Life. They're not on the promotions tool just yet, but we're hoping to do that very soon. But if you're interested in being on the list for any audiobook promotions, you can email writinglife@kobo.com and we'll add you. But what we found that was very interesting is that people are actually doing free audiobooks, which isn't something that I thought would be a thing because they're so expensive to make. So what are your thoughts on that, Zach? Free versus encouraging somebody to use a token?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting approach, and I think that job number one for the majority of the market is just to introduce people to the format, which is really the same approach that we take at Kobo on the subscription model around offering the first audiobook for free. So really just to get people kind of familiar with the kind of the habit of listening, because it is definitely different and it's an intentional choice. But once you find your groove and find the times and places where you like to listen, I would say that it's that you can build that habit. I think that as a sales strategy as well, possibly having the first book in your series as the freebie and then hook people in and get them to pay for the subsequent books, is kind of an interesting play. But yeah, I think that as an introductory kind of opportunity to just hook people in, I'm all for it. Like it's a great approach.
Yeah, I think so too. We have been seeing people use it as the free first in series because that's such a tried and true marketing tactic for ebooks. So it's interesting to see if it works for audiobooks as well. And we curate the free page that's on Kobo.com. And we've recently added a carousel just about audiobooks. And we have a spotlight for our audiobook of the week. And since doing that, we've noticed our downloads have doubled. It's interesting that there's people out there. And I'm excited with audiobooks because they have to get into the Kobo ecosystem. They have to download the app and get used to it. So I think it's really, really interesting. And I'm going to keep an eye on it.
Definitely.
So Mustafa has a question. How are audiobooks doing in kind of Asian regions like Japan, Chinese regions? Do you have any insights into this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So China in particularly is just another massive growth market. So the latest data that I have was that publishing was a $150 billion industry in China in 2019. In that time, audiobook sales have gone, between 2016 and 2020, audiobook sales have jumped by 30% in China.
Wow.
So it's growing just tremendously quickly. 1.45 billion in 2020, which is a 48% increase compared to 2019. I also, it looks like, so my latest data shows 569 million audiobook customers in 2020. So China is a massive market. Japan is also a really strong audiobook market, along with like Taiwan and Hong Kong. So yeah, we're seeing really fast pickup of all things audio throughout kind of Asia Pacific.
I'm very impressed. You had those numbers just right on hand. You
just
did your research.
Ready to roll.
I know. Amazing. So we have some questions about audiobook creation. Graham is asking for guidelines to how to record an audiobook. Our advice would always be, unless you are an actor or an expert in your field, if it's a nonfiction book, we would always advise to use a professional. If you're Malcolm Gladwell, you for sure can narrate your own book, but it's harder than you think. Somebody gave us some really good advice once. It was on a podcast episode that they were like, if you're thinking about doing it yourself, go into a closet, shut the door, and read your own book aloud for 30 minutes or an hour. And if you can stand that, then maybe you could pursue it. But if you can't, that's a good teller of how much work is involved and doing it for sure. So I would definitely advise, there's lots of places out there that can help you create the book, whether it's like Findaway or different other places. And you can do royalty share. So if you don't want to pay all up front and stuff like that. So there's a wealth of resources online for that. So I wanted to ask you, speaking of narrators, as we're kind of in the future, we're slowly seeing AI audiobooks, at least AI voices increase in where you're seeing them. So what are your thoughts on that? I know we had an internal discussion recently with Michelle, I forget her last name now.
Michelle Katz.
Yes, where we were talking about the AI-driven books versus human narration. So do you want to talk about that a little bit, Zack?
Definitely, yeah. So, the kind of text-to-speech format has really evolved a ton, even in the last year. So what there's a number of companies out there who are training their AI programs to emulate emotion and intonation, and they're really like training them to read a book in a very natural kind of non-robotic way, and it's getting really good. We in a kind of Kobo internal meeting a couple of weeks ago, we played a game that was like, is this a human or is this a robot?
I was bad. I
And it
don't
was
I don't
like,
think I got any right.
it was amazing that there were some narrations from the synthesized voices that were like so good, to the point where you're hearing like a very subtle like inhalation of breath at the beginning of
Wow.
a sentence. Like it's very like super subtle, but it's just like, wait a minute, did that robot just breathe in? Like it's just like, so it's getting really good. Um, and there are also some really bad ones that sound super robotic. Uh, so as the technology continues to get better, I think that we're going to see the price, an opportunity for price to come down, because that's really the core opportunity, is to cut out more of the like personal narration as well as the audio mixing afterwards. And so they're really trying to like bring down that level of human intervention, so that the narration can be as automated as possible, and then consequently the price drops. So you go from, like if it were like a professionally narrated audiobook at like, $300 per finished hour, with an AI narrator, it might go down to like 100 or 150. So we're seeing like a big shift there. That said, I don't think we're yet at a place where people are about to give up on like the human voice. I think that, there's a lot that's not going anywhere. Human narrated audiobooks, I think, will be around for a while to capture the emotion and to really add to the performance and to the storytelling. Those elements are super valuable. And at the same time, the bringing down the cost of narration so dramatically unlocks tons of additional, backlist content or educational content or accessibility content, or things that maybe, have traditionally never had the financial outlook to be worthwhile in publishing as a like human narrated audiobook. So the AI narration, I think, is really interesting because it's just going to unlock, more content to be made available in the audio format. Um, there's some interesting stuff also going on with like the narrator community, which is, I think, worth calling out, where, there are, understandably so, a lot of narrators who are unsure about kind of where this technology is going and where it's going to leave them. And so, we know of a couple of these synthesized narration companies that are um, that are licensing the use of a person's voice and then paying royalties over time, every time that voice is used, and then every book sale that uses that voice. So as a voice actor,
It's so interesting.
yeah, it's really, really. I think that's been an intentional decision to kind of help fend off the backlash and recognize that, like the training of the AI and having it like replicate your voice, should be is worthy of compensation. And
Mhm.
so, like, you can train an AI. If I were a voice actor, I could train an AI using my voice, and like I said, any book that used that particular that used my voice, I would get royalties on.
Wow. Yeah, it's like being an actor, or like, yeah, it's just so interesting.
Oh yeah.
Um, I definitely Yeah, Rich just says makes legal sense, Zack, pay to get copied, like if somebody would like Morgan Freeman's voice on a book, you know. I feel like he's
Totally.
got such a soothing tone.
Oh yeah, he could read me the phone book, and I'd be happy.
I'd be crying somehow. I'd be like, yeah, he speaks really to me. But yeah, I kind of like see a world where maybe AI driven content lives alongside sometimes narrated content. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I guess it's kind of like the equivalent of like paperback or a hardcover, you know? Do you think that that's the world we're going toward, where people can sort of choose, or do you think that the technology will be so good that we probably won't be able to tell the difference?
Yeah, I think that the technology is going to be, going to continue to advance at a really amazing and incredible rate. That said, I think that you're never going to be able to like truly capture like Morgan Freeman's
Yeah.
like I don't know, not just his voice, but like the presence that he commands in a performance.
Yeah.
I think is kind of is really interesting, and so that I don't see that going away. But I think for like if there's like just a way to quickly and cheaply produce a huge volume of content that would never see the light of day in audiobook format, that's really interesting.
Yeah, for sure. And especially because audiobook listeners tend to sometimes follow narrators as they would do an author. So it's funny that we hear people reporting that, I've listened to this genre for the first time because this narrator moved into it, and I wanted to listen to him talk. So I think that's
Yeah.
always really interesting. They're sort of the superstars of that realm.
Totally. Oh yeah. And I think that, I think like narration, the narration and the narrator is just like such an important layer to an audiobook experience. And we're also seeing more playfulness with the format itself, where there are there's audiobook performance that are like full cast, and so you've got kind of multiple people who are narrating together, and then you've also got audiobooks that are a little bit have even more like soundscapes as part of them, and so those are kind of interesting and emerging. And then in the Kobo and Conversation podcast, our CEO Michael Tamblyn interviewed Malcolm Gladwell, and in that interview, Gladwell was talking about how he's trying to make audiobooks that are like books that are audiobooks first, that just like make sense, and you can add to the telling of the story by including other audio elements. So, for example, in his book Bomber Mafia, he had actual interviews and actual like audio footage, of these British generals who were commanding airstrikes and things. And so they were like, Gladwell's position is like, let's do more with the audio format, and let's like push the boundaries of what's possible in that kind of way of storytelling, which is so interesting, and I think is like kind of gets me in thinking about like, okay, so is that what's next for audiobooks? Is this kind of directionally what we're going to see more of, do you think?
I think so. I think it's whatever the listeners are interested in, because that brings to mind. So I'm a massive Nick Cave fan, the musician, like Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. But he's also an author, and in 2009 he released I think it was his latest novel. I think it's the latest one that he's done since, The Death of Bunny Monroe. But he also, because he's a musician, did an audiobook with it where he had music in the background, and it was sort of like atmospheric, like you could hear things and feel things, and that was a while ago, but I don't think the audience was quite ready for that, so I want to actually go back and listen to it, because I don't think I even listened to it when it came out, but I bought the book. So yeah, I definitely think that as people are getting used to listening more to audiobooks, that these additional things can definitely be added. Because I remember Malcolm Gladwell's last audiobook really felt like his podcast, where he had like the interviews included, and having like even just musical interludes between chapters is something, it's quite nice. Like,
Definitely. Yeah. I think that we'll see more um like more experimentation and just more like different elements kind of layered in. And I'm here for it. I think it's really like it's interesting and it's fun, and we don't, I think that there's, I'm sure, well, as long as there have been audiobooks, there has been this debate about like what is the narrator's role, and like what is the role of the performance in the audiobook. And like for the longest time, like when books were being recorded onto vinyl and being like shipped around the country, by the American Association for the Blind, like the kind of the approach or the thinking was, oh no, the narration needs to be like totally neutral, so that the reader isn't getting anything like different from what the author intended to write. And so we've
So
seen this, like,
interesting.
yeah. And so it's been like this huge kind of format debate that's happened over the course of like 60, 70 years. And I think we're now getting to this place where people are a little bit less rigid about what that could like feel like.
Yeah, absolutely. Rashid has a question about how we compare the sales of ebooks and audiobooks. I think to answer that as an independent author, the reports that we're getting for a lot of the authors that we deal with are wide. So they're obviously publishing on many different platforms. And in the past year or so, definitely hearing more and more authors say that their audio sales are eclipsing their ebook sales. And it's definitely growing. So I'm sure that you're probably seeing that in terms of sales too, Zack, that like you're just saying it's this market that is just rapidly growing.
Oh, for sure. I mean, more people are discovering audiobooks and also podcasts.
Mhm.
And so there's this kind of, we're definitely still on an upward trend. Only 46% of customers have ever listened to an audiobook, based on some recent research from Edison. And so that, I mean, that to me is just like points to the fact that like there is big opportunity in the audio space. And we're when we think about the numbers of like, what did I say, 570 million customers in China who are audiobooks listeners.
Yeah.
It's absolutely massive, and I think that there is definitely like growth opportunity, and it's really exciting.
Mm-hmm. It's exciting that it's such a global opportunity as well, for sure, because of people listening to so many things. I wanted to just kind of mention that, we were talking about like a creative space where there would be like multi narrators and things like that. I know a lot of romance books do dual narration because there's usually, the romantic couple side parts. It does add that additional cost because unless your narrator is amazing, you sometimes have to get two narrators. So that's something to be aware of. But I think it's really interesting to see what it'll open up in terms of just creativity with it. Because what was the Kobo original we did? Was the Dickens title?
Oh yeah, the Christmassy one.
Yes, a Christmas Carol, right?
Christmas Carol.
But it was a theater group that they recorded because we
Yeah,
actually went to see it in the theater. It was really great. And they recorded it like this multi-cast thing, and it was just so enjoyable.
totally. Yeah, I think that like we're seeing kind of this like plays and adaptations um, being brought into the audiobook format, which is so interesting, and like it makes so much sense,
Hmm.
that you would have this performance that can be translated into the audio format, especially if it's like a beloved classic, like A Christmas Carol. And so that's, yeah. I've seen kind of more and more of these audiobooks coming out that are like recorded from screen stage performances.
Hmm. Nice, nice. I'm interested in that because I know like screenplays and plays can exist as like an ebook, but it might not be the most enjoyable way to consume that, you know. So the audio is definitely something that people can do.
Totally.
Um, so we're coming toward the end of our hour. So if there's any questions, be sure to drop them into the chat. I wanted to ask you, I mean, this is sort of, you've really covered it already, but where do you see the future of audiobooks?
Yeah, I think the biggest is just the growth,
Mhm.
and the shifting expectations towards all you can eat. I think that, as more platforms take up the all you can eat approach, I think that we're going to see consumer expectations kind of really shift in that direction, and publishers will eventually, I think, really begin to embrace that subscription format. I don't necessarily think that that like the token model is going away anytime soon, but certainly, I'm certainly seeing that kind of shift, and which is really quite interesting, and also just brings, we talk a lot about um, whether that model is like as profitable for authors, and for like the kind of all you can eat approach, which is really like billing happens on a per minute listened basis. And we find that, yeah, that that this model of payouts is doing very well for a lot of authors. So it's a really kind of interesting one. We've touched on AI narration. We've touched on kind of like the bending and kind of tweaking of the format itself. But really, I think it's just, we're going to continue to see a lot of blending between the world of podcasts and the world of audiobooks. I think that that's kind of natural. And we've also, collected research that shows that a lot of customers are interested in like short format, like snackable audio content. And so, which also I think lends itself really nicely to more of an all-you-can-eat model, as opposed to spending your $12.99, the credit that's valued at $12.99 on a 99-cent, 1 hour audiobook, or like mini novella or something like that.
Yeah, we're seeing that with some authors that I've noticed, that they might have their books exclusive on Audible, but they'll have a novella that they can bring to Kobo, which I really love the idea of that. And then I know that we have like kind of other companies that we've talked to. BookFunnel, Damon from BookFunnel was on here last month, and they are delivering audiobooks now. So they allow you to kind of deliver snippets or anything like that
Cool.
to listeners, and it's just really interesting to see like every company sort of like really noticing how important this market is. So I think as an indie, it's something you should definitely consider, and consider publishing with Kobo Writing Life. So like I said, in case you missed it, if you don't have the audiobook tab on your account, just email the team at writinglife@kobo.com and we'll add that for you. And it's a super easy way of publishing an audiobook up to our site, and also being able to promote on our site as well. So I guess I want to ask you, what's the audiobook that you are listening to now, and what's the one that you've enjoyed the most?
So I'm currently listening to an audiobook called Braiding Sweetgrass. And it is fantastic. It's written by an Indigenous woman who is also a trained botanist. And so it's kind of got this amazing blending of like scientific, Latin names and how things work, with the kind of more traditional knowledge around like why things work. And it's beautifully written. It's narrated by the author. One of the things that I love about it is she talks a lot about language. And what's cool about this book is that, you can hear the Potawatomi language being spoken. And like there are currently like 9 fluent Potawatomi speakers in the world left.
Wow.
So she's, the author's like taking language courses, and she talks about that process, and like, she's got sticky notes all over her house about what all the words are, and she just tells this beautiful story about the process of of learning and reclaiming language, but you also just get to hear it spoken, which I think is really like magical and really is a beautiful way of experiencing the author's book, and just this little snippet of language. You wouldn't get that in the ebook or the audio or the physical book.
Yeah, I love that idea because just any languages that are sort of like in decline. Because I'm from Ireland and my Irish is terrible, and I know growing up it would have been maybe easier. So I'm going to hunt out some Irish audiobooks to see if there's anything Oscailga, because it is kind of the country we're trying to do. We're trying to bring it back, get people
Love
speaking more
that.
Irish. So
I love
yeah.
that. Yeah, it's great. And then another book that I just love is this is one that I always recommend to someone who is like new to the format. Well, there's two actually. One is The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien, which is just a fantastic way to get into audiobooks. I mean, if you've never heard the story before, or if you have, it's beautifully written. It's just like so descriptive. It lends itself wonderfully to like a long walk in the woods. It's just the performance is fantastic. The like OG version is narrated by this guy named Rob Inglis, and he had a stage production, like a one-man show of Lord of the Rings in the 70s.
Oh wow, I would
and
love to see that.
and they tracked him down and had him record The Hobbit and then the 3 Lord of the Rings books. Because like he's doing voices and he's just like he sings the songs. It's delightful to listen to.
Oh, I'm adding that to my library
Would
right
it?
now.
Oh yeah. For sure, get that one. And then Neil Gaiman's The Graveyard Book is also a really excellent excellent listen for someone who's just kind of dipping a toe in the audio format.
Nice. Thank you. Those are great recommendations. I'm like a real sucker for The Lord of the Rings, so I will have to check that out. I haven't reread those books in a long time, so I'm excited for that.
Nice. Yeah, I think that was like, I just have these this is just kind of a weird like tangent, but I find that I have these like vivid memories of like where I was walking or like riding the bus or like where I was when I listened to a particular part of a book that like really stood out. And I listened to The Hobbit like early on in my days at Kobo, and I just like very vividly have like this every time I get like the bus stop by the office, reminds me of the part of The Hobbit where they encounter the trolls, and it's just like this. It's this thing that's like tethered the place to the part of the book. And I find that this is a weird thing that happens to me when I'm listening to audiobooks, where like places remind me of moments.
I definitely find that as well. There's something about just the audio format that does that to you. It takes you to places, and like especially if you're listening while you're traveling somewhere or anything, it's a really nice way of kind of going back to a specific space.
Totally
Nice. Well, thank you very much, Zack. Is there anything that we missed that you would like to talk about? Or I'll let you get back to your lunch break that I've stolen.
Yeah. Thank you. No, this has been a lot of fun. And thanks to everyone for your questions. And I mean, if I can encourage you to chase this audiobook train, like it's great. It's growing. We've got a wonderful and active, subscriber base and lots of people who love audiobooks. So I would just encourage you to give them a shot. And our KWL like dashboards and like the technology backing it just keeps getting better. So our teams are working really hard and just making it easier and better for you. So come check us out.
Here. All right. Well, thank you very much, Zack. We'll have to have you back again. This was really a wonderful chat.
I'd love that.
Okay. Bye, everyone. Thank you for tuning in, and thanks for all the great questions. Bye.
Bye.